possibility there. Just digitally superimposing. You might not enjoy it.
This year, do they have?
I've never actually done any of that. But really looking into the actual.
Oh, do they? See, last year they didn't have that. Last year they didn't have that. Oh, that's right.
I know.
I remember that.
Guys out there.
And then we got something with the Gil.
Before digital, so right.
Because usually you used to have
Photographs
really
are
huge.
determined. And I suppose somebody has.
All these
I know there's a big controversy. I never made a decision about it because I never really examined it. All I can do is just hear the pros and cons, you know. And then all of a sudden it goes, it goes way up there.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Bay, I should say the UFO panel here. I'm the host of the Bay Area UFO panel. I'm pleased to say that. Welcome to the Conscious Life Expo. How are you guys all doing? It's not fun, bringing the family together, looking at consciousness, looking at spirituality. We're here right here in Los Angeles, and we are here with 6 of the best researchers in the UFO business. I think you're going to find this very startling and very intelligent. Right now, there is tremendous interest in UFOs, angels, extraterrestrials, paranormal phenomena. These things are on our mind. They are part of your life. I want to salute each every one of you that came here today because something drew you here today. Something that is in your spirit that drew you here so you could understand some greater work about how we sit in the universe, a little bit about the origin of the soul and who we are as people. It's a remarkable time that we're living in, a great time of conscious change. And when you hear all the reports today, I think you'll agree that we are on the cusp of perhaps the greatest experience in the course of human history. Whether you're looking at the Maya, the Native American, the Egyptians, the Sanskrit, the Gita, the Bible, all of them point towards this particular time in history as we the year 2012, when there is supposedly a change in the paradigm, a great change unparalleled and unrivaled by any other point in history. I do believe when we walk out of here, we might be able to agree that the potential for extraterrestrials to land on planet Earth and to actually reveal that we are part of a greater community by the year 2012 will perhaps be a reality. So I want to thank you all for coming. Our discussion today is, who are the extraterrestrials? I see a bunch of them right in the audience right now. Some of you look so familiar. We see you all at the Bay Area UFO. How many people here go to the Bay Area UFO Expo up there in Northern California? I see, we know who you are. And wonderful expo. But right here, we have the best of the best. To my right, I have Jose Escamilla. He has been in the business for a long time. His experiences in New Mexico in 1994 have put him on a variety of television shows. You've seen him on the History Channel, you've seen him on CNN and several others, and he came out with a famous story on Coast to Coast about particular rods, these cylinder-like objects that were flying through our skies. I think you're going to hear today what they are and what they are not, myths and misconceptions. I think he's extraordinary. You need a big hand. Oh, hail Britannia, as I always say to my best pal here. Serena Wright Taylor has been my own personal astrologer and my own personal intuitive counselor and guide. And a UFO babe, as Jose says, yes. And she also deserves a lot of credit because she actually helped put this panel together and actually helps put the expo together. She has been studying UFO phenomena since she was a child and talked about dreams and night classes where she was shown all kinds of extraterrestrial beings and ships in the sky. Although known for her psychic and astrology, she spends her time continuing to research in current UFO situation. Recently she had been investigating the island of Puerto Rico. You're going to see some of that with her wonderful husband, Douglas Taylor, over there, who came back with absolutely undeniable evidence that there is perhaps some activity and even a base, maybe even down there. You're going to hear about that. But on a personal note, I just want to say that I've been in this business a long time. I've seen everybody, other channels, the the foo-foos, the wannabes, the used-to-bes, the ones that claim that they have the contact and this kind of thing. She, in my opinion, is the real deal. I've been with her for 7 years, and we speak to a number of hosts, whether they be Pleiadian guides, Syrian guides, a host of other angelic realms, the seraphim, the cherubim, the Elohim, so many others. She speaks with spiritual guides. If you're looking for intuitive counseling or awareness or your contact or have paranormal activity or you're walking between the worlds a little bit, she's a wonderful guide, a wonderful counselor, very grounded, very present, and is the real deal. I can't say enough about her. Please give her a wonderful hand for Serena Wright Taylor. Nancy Birnes is with us. She is the editor-in-chief of UFO magazine, so you got to bet that the journalism and best reporting is going to come out of the middle of this group here as far as stories that are being submitted. The stories are being submitted in UFO magazine all the time, and she's at the forefront of UFO research for really over 20 years. Her husband is famous Bill Birnes, and they have been involved in this science for such a long time that they have that vision, that foresight, and understanding of some of the myths and misconceptions about what this represents to us. I think you're going to find her report very, very interesting. Please give her a big hand. Another fellow Brit, Ed Sherwood, is with us today. He's an internationally known crop circle investigator. He's also a UFO witness with close encounter experiences from the first to the fifth kind. This is a man who understands a lot about the phenomena, about what it is to walk between the worlds, and I think we're going to find out what the crop circles really are here. Let's face it, if extraterrestrials landed on planet Earth, it wouldn't serve to land on the White House lawn. Imagine how that would affect the consciousness of humanity, especially when our president walks out. Two extraterrestrials walk out of this tremendous bright light and everything, and they take a look at our president and say, "You see, Gorton, I told you there was no intelligent life here." Sorry, I had to throw that in there. Give a big hand for Mr. Ed Sherwood. And next, David Sereda has been in this business for a long time. Personal friend of Dan Aykroyd, the original Conehead. But more importantly, having a relationship with somebody like Danny Aykroyd is very important because he has tremendous pull in the media. But David Sereda's work stands on its own. His first aspiration in life was to become an astronaut. It's a very good thing. Today he is a space scientist, free-thinking physicist, spiritual explorer, ecologist, and author and filmmaker. He gathers an extraordinary amount of visual images, stills, DVDs, slide footages. His website is loaded. What's your website, David?
It's davidsereda.blogspot.com. Sereda is S-E-R-E-D-A.
Yeah, take a look at that because his site is one of the best that's out there. A lot of people visit it and everything, but I think you're going to find him, again, one of the most interesting researchers in this field, with the depth of knowledge. So give him a big hand.
On my website, I just launched a petition to put me on the space shuttle so I can look for UFOs. So if you go to my website, there's an email at NASA where you can send the petition in, and it's not a joke actually. NASA scientists wrote me and said if enough Americans want you to go on the space shuttle, that is one way that we could end this debate on whether there are UFOs occurring on space shuttle missions. So I'm a skydiver, 24,000 feet, I've done this night, I'm not afraid of the dark. I am afraid of being in a small tin can in space, but I think I can deal with that.
Right
So
on.
go to my site and sign the petition.
Can you spell your website again?
It's David Sereda, no periods, S-E-R-E-D-A, David D-A-D-I-D, dot blogspot, B-L-O-G-S-P-O-T.
Your microphone is not on.
It's not on.
Closer to you.
Too far
Can we
away.
get that on there?
Oh, this one.
We can't hear you.
Get closer to you.
Can you hear that? Yeah. So it's davidsereda.blog, B-L-O-G-S-P-O-T.com. davidsereda.blogspot.com. That's where my position is.
All of us are going to be able to mention our websites too, so you'll be able to get all that information and tune in afterwards. And at the end, friends. Met him while he had hosted a show in London, called me up, and I was very privileged to be on Rob Simone's show. He hosts a show here on 104.4 FM and has explored many areas of paranormal and unexplained phenomena over the last 15 years. In the late 1990s, Rob began working for the civil activist organization, Cause Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. He became the world's first paranormal paralegal by affidavits, eyewitness testimony, photographs for trial evidence. Very interesting. He has also recently been included in Fate magazine's top 100 UFOlogists, along with people like Jack Russich and Steven Spielberg. I think that speaks for itself. But as a person, I know him to be a very grounded guy, personal friend who has dedicated his work in science in this area and taken a tremendous amount of time to enlighten people. And I think many other articles that you see kind of out there have Rob's background as well. He's interviewed pretty much everybody in the business. I've been seeing everything from national television, local television, and then, of course, on national and international radio. Please give Rob Simone a big hand. We're going to start off. What we're going to do is, since the family's all together, it's so great to have the family together, isn't it? So when I got here, you know, somebody came up to me and said, I saw this wonderful lady, and I just thought, you know, to introduce myself. I said, hi, I'm Robert Perala. And she said, oh, God. I said, what? She said, you're with those UFO people. Oh, no. I said, is it something? I said, no. She says, I know you hang out with a band of little pirates and everything, and they drink, and they go up on the hill, and they look for the UFOs and everything. Aren't you ashamed? I said, yes, ma'am. I am ashamed once in a while of people that don't have an open mind and want to know more and expand their awareness like us. Rock and roll! What do you say? Okay, we're going to open it up. What we're going to do is 15 minutes each. And each one is going to present their work, case for their study. And we're going to also have some visuals for you today. And we're going to be in here a while, but I think you're going to find this really cool. Welcome, incredible, Jose Escamilla.
Well, my course started back in '94, right at the culmination of the Northridge earthquake. At that point in time, I've been a film and video editor for like 28 years here in Hollywood, Los Angeles area. And I was finally doing my dream. And my dream has always been to edit a film and score the music. So I finally started that part, of my career. And then this earthquake hit. Northridge earthquake sent me back home for a while, for a spell. I'm originally from Roswell, New Mexico. Born and raised in, I was born in Loving, New Mexico. I grew up in Roswell. So I went home right after the earthquake, and I can't turn the volume down with this stupid phone. Right. So I went home, and it was on March 5th, 1994 that my brother and sister, we have a farm 9 miles south of Roswell. And my brother and sister called me on a Saturday afternoon, March 5th, 94, and they said, Jose, bring the video camera, there's UFOs out here. And I said, yeah, right, my mom wants me to go out and have beans and tortillas or something, or hang with the crew, the family, because she's, always out there and hang out at the farm, as we call it. I grew up in Roswell, and Midway, the air base is where the 509 Squadron was, is located about a couple of miles from our farm, right there in Midway. So we used to see the jets, the B-52 bombers go all the way down in missions to White Sands, and we'd see them test, dropping bombs back in 1957. I used to see them when I was a kid. You'd see squadrons of B-52s flying out towards White Sands and dropping their bombs, whatever they were doing. So it was March 5th, 94, and sure enough, I went out there, but I was expecting to see, and I was expecting to hear John Williams' music, and see these huge UFOs flying in, Spielberg type. That's not the way it looks. That's not the way it happens. Instead, there were these objects that immediately I thought it was a balloon, okay, at first glance. But it was an object that was about that big around, at arm's length, about as big as a golf ball, and it was way up there, at 12 high, 12. Broad daylight, no clouds in the sky, and I filmed 16 minutes of this thing just hovering. And at first I said, it looks like a balloon, but then it started doing maneuvers that, weather balloons don't do. They don't fly that fast. So I filmed 16 minutes of what I thought would be the only UFO footage I'd ever capture on video. Being a film video editor, I'd never experienced filming UFOs. I'd seen a lot of things back in the early days. I was in a rock and roll band. 60s, and we were touring all over Roswell, New Mexico, and Texas, and Arizona. And we used to see a lot of things in those days too, you know. We had our first experience coming out of Carlsbad, New Mexico at 3 in the morning. We had played a prom in Carlsbad, and flying out, this object was so huge it flew right over us. I felt we could jump up and touch it. And I had some missing time at that point. So, you know, I'd had UFO experiences before then, but this was the first time I did anything. And I was not prepared at looking at video of UFOs. I mean, usually, you know, I was used to seeing like the Billy Maher footage that had the big object hovering there and this kind of thing. These things were trucking, man. They were fast. And so fast that only a film and video editor that's experienced in this type of field could catch, because, you know, they're so fast you can just barely see them. So I started slowing down the footage and realized that there were not only this one object, covering that turned out to be a dome ship object, but there were also triangular ships flying about, other UFOs that had like headlights on, but they were spinning. They also had the rod objects, the cigar-shaped objects, were traveling extremely high speeds, but you can only see them when you go frame by frame in the fields of video. So proved to be a different type of phenomena, a different way of looking at UFOs that I'd never, you know, realized before. These things are fast. Okay, they're in the realm of very fast. Our perception is 24 to 30 frames per second, and we're used to seeing things in this type of realm. These things are traveling in faster, in the faster realm of high speed, and this is why, at first, we started filming at 1/2000 shutter setting, which allowed us to film at a higher speed, so that things would not blur. And I'll get to the rods phenomenon in a little bit, because there's been a controversy about the rods and, you know, the Instax camera artifacts. This was the first time that I'd seen a UFO in broad daylight and filmed it. And for the next few years, I had 38 sightings, broad daylight, right there midway in Roswell. I was one of the first people to film UFOs over Roswell, New Mexico, in broad daylight. And I have footage that's just enormous. I have black helicopters that transform into dome-shaped objects. I have spherical objects that are a big marble in the sky, big on a contrail. They're not jets, it's definitely a round object. I think it's military experimental aircraft. We have triangle ships, cigar-shaped things. We even have on film, right over Roswell, traveling at extreme high speed and very translucent, almost invisible. An object that looks like a bird of prey from Star Trek. I mean, this thing looks just like the bird of prey. And the phenomenon still, a lot of people don't realize, but Roswell is very busy as far as UFO activity. I mean, I'm still getting footage from it from my brother and sister. Enormous amount of stuff. We had 350 dome-shaped objects traveling in V formation, shaped like a sergeant's symbol. Okay? Stripes, sergeant stripes. 3 V formations, but they were like 350 objects, you can imagine that. And where they went, where they came from, we don't know, but they were right there. You know, and they flew towards Roswell, towards the airbase coming from the south. So the activity occurs. I'm going back there in July. I'm presenting a film that I produced, recently finished producing, called UFO, The Greatest Story Ever Denied. And within that film, I have allocated the original footage of the Battle of LA, which is an event that occurred here in 1942, right over Culver City in Santa Monica, where the military shot for the first time. They shot at an actual UFO, couldn't bring it down. I found the footage that we never knew that it didn't exist. It was by accident that I got my hands on it. And this film is screening, by the way, at 6 p.m. At 6 p.m. in the screening room over in the lobby area. Be the first presentation to the public. I've been selling it on the internet, on my UFO website. It's called theUFOmovie.com. And I'm producing a series of UFO movies that I'm putting a little different spin in the way we look at UFOs. I was looking at a way to come up with a theatrical feature on UFOs, and I didn't want to do a typical TV special like History Channel or Discovery Channel that has the usual suspects. They have the ufologists, the abductees, and then the skeptics who just tear everything down. So I eliminated all the bullshit and decided to do a real film. And I decided to do a movie that would pack theaters and make people want to see it in a theater, to pay the only way to do that is to prove that UFOs are real. And this film, I feel, proves without a doubt that UFOs are very real, and it shows you how the military and the Air Force, the Pentagon, created the ridicule and the myth about UFOs that we suffer today. All UFO researchers always, had the fear that we're going to get ridiculed or made fun of or threatened. It was the military that did that, and I detail that in the film. They're so arrogant they even say it. They tell the public. The Air Force implemented it. So there's no mystery about UFOs. They're very real. They're among us. On a thing called the rods that Robert mentioned, back in '94, as I was filming these UFOs over Midway and Roswell, I saw something that, at first glance, I thought it was an insect or a bird flying close to the camera lens. And it was at high speed. So I go, that's unusual, let me check it out. And because I'd had these UFO, I'd actually seen these UFOs in broad daylight, I threw logic out the window. I said, this is a possibility. It could be something that I've never seen before, none of us have seen. And I started filming for these things, but before I released the information to the public, I had to make sure that I was not fooling myself and just capturing insects or something close to the lens, because I'd seen insects. Come on, as an editor, you do that. So I devised a way of filming these things at high shutter setting. What it turns out to be is there's something among us that I believe is an entity of some kind. They swim through the air like fish in the sea. They are anywhere from a foot long up to 100 feet in length or more. There's been a big controversy that it is nothing but misfilmed insects due to artifacts created by CCD camcorder technology, which I already realized that, there was going to be something that might come about if you film at a low shutter setting. If you film these things on high speed, high shutter settings, you eliminate the artifact, which creates a motion blur, is what it is. So there's a lot of skepticism, and a lot of people are trying to debunk me and say they're just strictly insects, there's nothing to the rods. But I have footage of these things coming out of the ocean, and they're huge. Coming out of the ocean, entering and swimming under the ocean, in the ocean. I also have footage of them from a shuttle in space, rods coming in from space, taken with shuttle cameras, using ultraviolet camera film. And also, we have footage of them on Mars and on the moon, these things. So it's a phenomenon, and I have IMAX footage too that has come about that's pretty incredible. IMAX is 65 millimeter, 15 per film, huge, and it eliminates any kind of CCD artifact film. And I have footage of these things in high velocity, swimming through the air at 3,000 feet above Earth. And what else? You see, I have, on my film I have, that you're going to see today at 6 p.m., I have an incredible amount of evidence from alien bases on the moon that NASA has been airbrushing out, hiding from the public for many, many years. Also evidence of civilizations on Mars, and you'll see this in the film at 6 p.m. So try to check out my movie, man, and I'm selling the DVDs upstairs at the speakers, Alchemy Bookstore, is that what it is? Oh, at Serena's booth, yeah. At the top of the stairs on the second floor, we have a little booth set up there. And I've got my DVDs there. The way I fund my films is I sell movie credits. Okay, so if you want to be a co-producer in my next film, which is The Human Record, okay? I'm doing by the way. The first one's The Greatest Story Ever Denied. The second one is The Human Record, which details all the evidence from petroglyphs all the way to current footage of UFOs captured in high-def, high-speed film. The third one is called Moon Rising, and it has all the stuff, all the alien stuff on the moon, alien artifacts, stuff that NASA hid. And you can see where NASA airbrushed a lot of things out, okay? But the Russian footage, the zombie that the Russians took, they didn't airbrush the stuff out. So I'm showing you what NASA airbrushed out and the Russians kept in their footage, and you see what NASA's hiding from you. There's towers up there that are 9 miles high. Okay? There are pyramids up there. There are many, many artifacts that are just incredible. And that's just on the moon. On Mars is another story. So third film's called Moon Rising. The fourth film is called The Human Experience, which is about the abductions, relations, the implants, things of this nature, the actual human experience where it's pretty scary what's been going on. A lot of people don't want to touch the subject, but it's real, okay? And we try to get to the bottom of who's doing it or what is doing it. The fourth film is called the Politics Behind UFOs. And you're going to be surprised today when you see my film as to the same names that have always appeared with the 9/11 and Iraq, Iran, the oil crisis and everything else. All these names that have been involved in the Kennedy assassination, 9/11, like I said, Iraq, Iran, World War II, Pearl Harbor. The same names seem to keep appearing in ufology and UFO cases. So it's kind of ironic that there's a political bent to everything related to UFOs. It's a very real phenomenon. There are ETs among us. At last count, I think there were like 58 different species that were cataloged among us. A lot of them were looking, but then a lot of them look just like us. I'll give you an experience that I had in Mesquite, Nevada, that I feel I had been visited by one. So I was taking photographs. The first time I'd been at a conference, it was the EBE Awards, yeah, and I had presented the Midway footage, and I was with a girlfriend of mine named Karen at that point. And we're taking photos. I had my rum and Coke, right, and Karen was here, and there was people posing with me for photos, photo ops, and we're taking snapshots. A friend of ours was taking snapshots. We only had about 8 shots left, and one gentleman came up before the last person. Gentleman came up, he had red hair, curly hair. I hope to see him again. And he had a tweed jacket on and a vest. And he comes up and he hugs me like this, and he says, "Jose, don't worry, things are going to be fine." Okay? And I said, "Oh, okay." Well, the last photo was taken. When we got the photos developed, all the photos, there were 3 people. Okay? It was framed for 3 people. The next to the last photo, the gentleman that was there was not there in the photo. Okay, and you can see on my arm where it's, something's pressing on my arm. And I'm holding my drink, you can tell. I mean, it's just an experience, one of many that I've had. But I feel that was an ET or somebody, a messenger that came to tell me, "Look, man, your job you're doing is going to be what you have to do." I feel we're all part. David Sereda here's out, way out over the top, trying to get people to realize, look, this is a real phenomenon that we're faced with out there. A lot of biologicals that are in space, and that NASA is trying to bring down. I have footage of that stuff too, and so does David. And I really respect all of our work together here because it takes a collective mind, okay, and a collective spirit to finally bring out the truth and present it to the world. And the world needs to be wake up to reboot some brainstems out there because before you know it, it's going to be too late, and we are in trouble right now. At the rate that we're going with the Bushreich and other people out there trying to kill the planet, we're in deep trouble. We need to collectively get together and do something about it. The way to do it is to attend conferences like this, purchase mine and David's videos and DVDs, pack the theaters, and let's tell the world that it's a real deal. Thanks.
Eloquently spoken, very good. Okay, next up, Serena Wright Taylor will give you the British report.
Can you hear me all right?
Closer.
Louder?
Louder. Closer.
Who's going to make it? Thank you. It's great to be here. The Conscious Life Expo, we always like to include a large section to do with UFOs. Because my feeling is, I'm sure on yours as well, is if you're conscious, you have to be conscious of what's really going on the planet. And just as Jose was saying, it's not like we think it is, or it's not like they want us to believe. There's so many dimensions, there's so much going on. There's a huge cover-up, very, very big cover-up. In fact, the cover-up is so big that that's why it's so hard for people to believe, because it is such a big cover-up. There's all kinds of ETs, and fortunately when I was little, I learned a lot about them at night. I would have psychic experiences. Because during the day I would spend a lot of time looking in ponds and learning about the little things that live in ponds. I loved insects and things. And during the night I would see, instead of having a ceiling there as I was going to sleep, sometimes the ceiling would disappear, and I would see planets and different beings in space, and I would understand, and I wasn't scared, because felt safe at the same time. But I would learn that there's beings in space that are alive, as Jose was saying, different kinds of spaceships. At that time I didn't know they were called UFOs. And also I saw our planes sometimes. I would see planes from this planet, all mixed up together with other planets and other things. And in fact, when I first saw my husband's paintings, you may be familiar with those, there's a big display at the top of the stairs. I thought, well, this is what I used to see when I was little. This is the same thing. But it led me to be always very interested in UFOs and extraterrestrials. And there's so many different kinds here. You hear a lot about the greys, and they're definitely here, and reptilians, but there's also beings that visit that are very high consciousness, very beautiful, they uplift people. Some of you may have had those experiences, and all those experiences we're talking about, some of you may have had these experiences. We went to Puerto Rico for the last couple of years to investigate, and also because my husband surfs, it's a perfect area. He can surf, and then we can investigate UFOs when there's no surf, so it's a wonderful vacation. Because his first experience with these kinds of extraterrestrials was when he was in Puerto Rico, and we wanted maybe to have that experience again. But also, I wanted to meet Jorge Martin, who is, you might have seen him if you're interested in UFOs. You might have seen him at the Laughlin Conference or read some of his books. Jorge and his wife Marlene, he's really the lead investigator in Puerto Rico, and he has a magazine called Enigmas. And he interviews witnesses all over Puerto Rico. It is really easy to meet people in that island who have had UFO experiences, because so many people have. And they are very regular people. They don't even want to be well known. They just want to talk about it because it was so unusual. And a lot of them have really got used to seeing UFOs and ETs there. And so we met Jorge. We went to investigate with him. He showed us the southwest area of Puerto Rico where we were. And basically, there's two main bases there that are military and ET. And really, this is very, very for sure, because so many people have had these experiences there. You might have heard of Laguna Cartagena, which is a beautiful area, beautiful lagoon, beautiful lake. But it's now being brought up by the government for the next 100 years as a nature reserve, but you can't go in and look at it. You used to be able to go in down a little pathway, look at the beautiful birds, there's ponies in there and all kinds of things. But they put double barbed wire around it ever since that in the late 80s, when there was a big explosion underneath. And people thought it was an earthquake, and they said it was an earthquake, officials, but actually there was big lights over the lake, UFOs going into the lake, and then blue smoke coming out. It sounds like a movie, but it's true. Regular people saw blue smoke coming out of the cracks in the ground and around the lake. And then the next day, the ETs kept being seen. People started seeing little greys walking around and talking about it. Then the next day, the military got there and roped everything off, and no one could go. But we have actually been into the lake. We've actually climbed over and under the barbed wire fences. We've got photographs of that area. And you feel all the time you're being watched. And when you look up in the sky, there's a little aerostat, a little balloon, a little airship in the sky with computer equipment, keeping track of everyone, even if you don't see anyone around. And they say it's there to catch drug smugglers, but they haven't caught one using that machine. They're just watching the ET activity there. This last time we were there, I wanted to investigate the area around Cabo Rojo Lighthouse, which is also in southwest Puerto Rico. It's very near that lake. And the reason I wanted to do that was because Jorge told us about this poor man. His name's Diego Segarra, and he had died very suspiciously. UFO investigation in his spare time. He'd been warned by phone calls not to share his information, not to talk about it anymore. They do that with people still in Puerto Rico, and that's why a lot of people don't want to talk about it. But I wanted to investigate that area because just before he died, he had told Jorge that he had found something near the Cabo Rojo Lighthouse. And then Jorge was on his way there. He got there 2 weeks after and found that he passed away in a very suspicious way. So there's nothing wrong. So we drove down towards the lighthouse, and I psychically felt a presence. You do in that area anyway. But we got out in an area where there's a lookout tower. And the lookout tower has a telescope on top, and you can look out over the salt flats. That whole area of Puerto Rico has a lot of salt flats. It's quite beautiful. It goes out to the ocean. So we're looking out there, and I thought, even though I feel something is here, they're not going to have a telescope pointing to anything. So what's on the opposite side? So I turned around, and across the street there was a really thick, dry forest. So I felt strongly there's something there. That's where we've got to investigate. So we crossed the road, and first of all, it says nature walk. It's another one of those nature reserves again, where you know there must be ETs, because that's why they reserve them. But there was also a salt flat in front of it, so it says, do not walk on the salt flats, danger. So this is very common, in Puerto Rico when there's something secret, that you know that it's a nature reserve, at the same time there's some kind of danger around it. In the same way as the caves are, for your own protection. When you're in a cave, you don't go off the pathway. That's to keep people safe, but it also is to hide things, I believe. But anyway, we walked across the salt flat, nothing happened to us. And then we started going through the winding little pathways in the middle of this dry forest. A dry forest is not like the tropical part. It's really thick. There's a lot of cactus mixed in with trees that have a lot of branches that conserve water, so it's really, really thick. And it's interesting that not only do you feel when you're there a strong presence and strange energy, but also there's not many birds seen. There was a couple of birds made some sound, we took photos of them, but it was really silent. But you don't have anyone else, there was no one else there investigating or looking around or hiking. It was just. But I felt safe because my husband's had these wonderful associations with these very higher thinking, higher consciousness ETs. So I wasn't scared because I knew, they're there too, and we're associated with them. So I took photos, about 30 different photos, especially in the areas where it was dark, because in those areas, the grays are more likely to be. They don't like the sun. And when I came, we took about 2 hours, and just as I was coming out of that forest, there was a really strong, uncomfortable feeling, and I actually started to run a bit. But I thought, I want to take a photo of the pathway because it's so beautiful, the trail, just to show people where we were. So I took one last picture of the trail, and then we came out. And I was a bit disappointed because I wanted to see an ET there or something. And but in my head, my voice, which is my guides, they said, you didn't see the aliens, but the aliens saw you. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Is that my imagination? But it wasn't, because it's the same kind of voice as when I do readings, when I get psychic information. So then we had a bit more of an adventure after that, which I'll go into later if there's time. But when we got back to the hotel, I took all the photos, put them on the TV, and blew them up, blew it up each corner, just looked at every bit of the photos, and there was an ET. There was a little ray alien. And in that last picture, when we were walking out of the forest, the trail, that I wanted to just take for the view, he was there behind a cactus. And it's hard to see at first, but as you blow up the picture, you can see the shape of the head, the 2 dark eyes, and a little pink mouth. And so the alien did see us, and we didn't see the alien. And that made me feel better that there was one actually there. And that means there's a lot there. If you see one, there's a lot. Because underneath that whole area is one of the bases that goes right out into the ocean, where the UFOs go into the lake or into the ocean, or either way. And the little ETs there are very interested in people. The military that try to keep them obviously separate from people. But the other people have had photos in the Yonki rainforest or other places where they have little ETs. Suddenly they see there's one hiding behind a rock or in the forest as they were walking along. They heard someone walking, but they couldn't see who it was. And in their photo, then they find there's a little alien there. And they want to find out what they're all about just as much as you want to find out what they're all about. So there's so many accounts from witnesses in Puerto Rico. I'm happy to share some of those stories with you, or any questions about psychically trying to tune into ETs. But I just wanted to end with the people of Puerto Rico, they always say that we don't mind the ETs being here. We just don't like the military when they start interfering. So I think that's and we have an exhibit at the top of the stairs, and you might have seen it. It's my husband's art that he started to paint after he had his first ET experience, and he had a lot more of interesting information coming after that. And we're doing a lecture tomorrow at 12 in UC, mostly about his experiences and the teachings he received after his experience. Thank you.
And next up, of course, we have Nancy Birnes, who was very generous to have UFO Magazine, the complimentary issues out front also. More importantly, get a subscription to this magazine. If you want to be up on this science, it's a great thing to be able. Get it regularly. Welcome, Nancy Birnes.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. And you already said exactly what I was gonna start with that, because we don't have an independent media in this country anymore. We are our little UFO magazine is the new media as far as I'm concerned, and we need you very, very, very importantly to try to subscribe, because that's how we stay alive. We are week to week, month to month, completely unfunded by big business or whatever, and we are here to tell you, and it's a dangerous business to be in, and you have to kind of love it, you have to really care, and you want to tell people the truth. And so if you can possibly subscribe, it's very, very, very inexpensive. It's for this particular conference, if you let me know you're here, you get half a year for $20, and that's 6 issues, and that's a nice deal. And you will love it. You will absolutely love it. And I'm here to I'm not an experiencer. I'm a reporter, and I'm a mainstream reporter. That's how I started. And this topic has cooties, terrible, terrible cooties. It really does. I'm basically in the process of ruining my reputation, my career. I have no future, but this is our latest. And you can see what a labor of love it is. It's a little baby. And we have found that we sell in most magazines when we have faces on the cover, so we're going to kind of stay with the faces, I think, for a while. And this magazine has, the topic for this panel is, who are the ETs? And so here's one of them, okay? I have, there's plenty of magazines here, they're all free. Please take as many as you can carry, and then try to get your friends to subscribe. The more people who subscribe, the more we'll stay alive. I'm telling you, until I drop, I'm going to keep on making this magazine. And we get the most amazing stories. We literally get phone calls in the middle of the night. Something very big is going on in this world. And I mean, I love the whole earth, I love New Age, but what's going on with a presence among us is so important and so underreported. And I wanted to mention that who are the ETs, who are the aliens? They are either outside of us, the other, something alien, or they are us. And so when you approach this subject, you either think about it, think about it like a psychiatrist, if they're us, or an anthropologist, if it's the other. And we cover various aspects of this every month. This issue, not a big seller because no face on the cover, we learned this now, is all about the American Indians, our Native American Indians, who believe the aliens are their star ancestors. They literally take it so for granted, and if you're someone who's learning about this culture, or if you are an American Indian, you will find that the lady who wrote this article, she's an academic, she goes up on mountains now and just waits for them, they come and they talk to her, so that's that story. That's one type of alien who is an ancestor of a whole race of people here. That's one person's story. Then we have this story, the baby. This is a lady from Australia who believes that the aliens have been mixing with us to the point now where the new babies, and if you have a child in your life right now, a brand new child, you probably have noticed, so many people have told me this, and I have a grandchild now, they are different. They're slightly different. Babies are not quite the same. I mean, we were dumb babies compared to the babies nowadays. These are really, what's going on with the children right now is kind of spooky, and this is a story about that. But the one I wanted to talk about is the story that moved me the most recently, and it's in this issue, which is January. Okay. And this is February. We're very cool, we're very ahead. And if I shouldn't be here, I should be working on March. It's a very small staff. You're looking at the staff. Anyway, this guy, his name is Jim Sparks, and he has a brand new book out. And he's an abductee. And now here's a story about the aliens are very different from us. They're very much the other. And they've been picking him up for his whole life. Now he's an Italian guy who is like a no-nonsense guy. He's not a guy who was was very happy about being taken. But the thing about his story that's so weird is that they began to teach him the language. And that is astounding. Because the language they're teaching him, and we have a lot of illustrations in here, you cannot go wrong with this magazine. You will like something about it. You know, everybody likes something. We try to be all things. But the language they were teaching him, or are teaching him, is in between our language and their language. Which seems to come at, they seem to be able to take information in quick packets, you know, sort of like you're psychic, but it's almost like it's a learned psychic behavior. And so the language they taught him was sort of like, it's not ABC linear, and it's not quick psychic, I learn everything from just looking at you. It's an in-between thing. And what's so weird is that people who studied ancient languages here, Hebrew language, for example, they have found that if they take a Hebrew, and you guys probably know more about this, but if you take a Hebrew symbol and you carve it out of stone or wood or whatever, and you put a light behind it, and you start to turn it and the light, all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet suddenly show up on the screen behind the thing. So as you turn it, it's sort of a holographic representation of all the letters. Well, that's kind of the language that he was being. And it seems as though, whether they are the other or whether they are us, they have been part of our culture, they've been part of us for so long that they might be behind our actual language. If you can intuit, if you can learn to intuit, if you can read Hebrew, and then ancient Arabic, it seems like there's, you know, if you've learned a mantra, there's something in the language that speaks to you, to your heart. That seems to be the packet information that this fellow is learning. And there seems to be, they perhaps have been here forever, and they have made us, and maybe there are good guys among them, and maybe there are bad guys among them. Maybe it's just like everything else. I don't have any answers. I can just tell you that we're constantly studying the topic. And I'm going to be short, because these guys have so much more to say. And as a reporter, I'm here to say that I report, and then these guys, the next two guys, three guys, will tell you so much more. And then I can answer questions, but I want to make my part short. So, there.
Again, don't forget to get a copy out there and support UFO Magazine because of the information that's out there. It's great. Ed Sherwood, going to talk about crop circles. Just a quick comment. Have you ever think about the fact that there's a consciousness here? We're very primitive by comparison to those visitors that transcend incredible distances it would take to get here in the first place. And maybe it wouldn't serve to just startle us and make a mass landing, but to perhaps maybe leave an imprint in Mother Nature herself, a crop circle. And you think about it, how could we have missed this? Of course, it's subtle. Why wouldn't they start with Mother Nature, something non-threatening? Because everything we get introduced to that's new and everything, we're sure we're going to build another weapon that could even clobber it bigger, you know. So crop circles are interesting things. He's going to have a lot to say. It's good, Sherwood.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for coming today. Before I really talk about crop circles, I'd like to just give you a little background on my UFO extraterrestrial psychic phenomena experience, because that really started for me.
Can't hear.
Is this better? Okay. Before I became a crop circle researcher, and I started in 1984, I'm one of the longest standing crop circle researchers on the planet. And my wife, Chris, over there, Chris and I have now combined almost 40 years of crop circle experience. I've actually witnessed what is behind the creation of many crop circles, and there is more than one source. But before I talk more about that, my experience with the extraterrestrial presence began in my early childhood with a direct experience. And most of what I feel I understand about the phenomena I can talk about have come through direct experience. I am an experiencer, and I have found that in life, experience is the best teacher. So if you really want to know something, you must experience it. And I'm someone who has put themselves in the situation where it could happen many times over and over. most of which the experience has been positive, some of which hasn't, but that's taught me things too. But my first encounter with an extraterrestrial intelligence began at the age of 9. It was a bedroom visitation. It was, at the time, at least the beginning of it, the most frightening experience I've ever had in my life. But basically it started as, in the middle of the night, I got out of bed, I stood by my bed, my brother was sleeping next to me, and I felt I had to wait for something. I didn't know what at the time, but it was like an order. And so I stood there in the darkness, something I wouldn't do normally at the time. And then a point of light appeared in the corner of the room, expanded, took on the form of a humanoid form. And as soon as I could see that and see the face and the eyes of this intelligent being, I was on the spot with fear. I can still remember to this day the little hairs on my neck standing up and not being able to speak or move. And then this being said to me, "Don't be afraid, I'm not going to hurt you." And as soon as the being said that, all of my fear just evaporated. And then he said to me, "Do you remember?" And as soon as he said that, I had a flood of mental images, which included images of my life, this life, and future moments in this life. As a 9-year-old child, that was a lot to take in, and most of which I couldn't understand at the time, but I did know how to do with my life. And then I have no memory of how the experience finished. However, I did understand from that okay, seeing the intelligences again, and this is what happened, and in a more concrete way, as physical sightings, sightings which at first I alone witnessed, but then I quickly learned, because I grew up in a place in England which at the time had the highest number of UFO sightings in Great Britain. Norfolk is the county, and it has a lot of American military air bases there. There were nuclear cruise missiles staged there at the time. I lived within a stone's throw of one of these bases, and so I got to see a lot of military as well as other things. But from age 11 onwards, the extraterrestrial presence started to appear in the form of craft in daytime. 99% of the time, I would feel it before it would appear. I would experience something, a clairvoyant sensation as to where the object would be, how many objects may be involved, and something that stayed with me right through to the present and has allowed me to initiate many witnesses over the years, take people out into the landscape, almost any landscape, and at will, if there's a possibility of something to appear, I tend to sense it and can direct you where to point your cameras, tell you when it's going to happen. And many people have witnessed this, and there have been quite a few films and photographs as a result of it, including my own. Just to race ahead slightly, in the last few months, I have videotaped more than 60 UFO sightings over Santa Monica in broad daylight, outside our apartment and immediate neighborhood. Again, this is partly through my sensing ability, and something else I'll say in a bit later. But at first, in the late 70s, I experienced, like almost any UFO experiencer did when they said they'd had an experience, and that was a lot of ridicule from my community. So I tried to grab witnesses, and that became my top goal. So I initiated the family. Everyone in the family witnessed what I was witnessing eventually, then teachers. I had an experience in school where there was 30 children and a teacher, and I had one of these clairvoyant sensations. It was like an that something was going to appear in a certain spot of the sky, and desperate for independent witnesses, I shouted at the whole classroom to look at a certain part of the sky. Moments later, a disc appeared. Everybody saw it, teacher included. That disc went on a couple of miles to another school and landed in broad daylight, and it was in the newspapers the following day. It was a major event. This type of experience multiplied, so I can call myself a close encounter experiencer of the first to the fifth kind. I've seen UFOs from many different distances, in daytime, nighttime, with up to 40 witnesses present. I have filmed and photographed. My wife has also photographed and filmed, and other people with me have photographed and filmed many of the objects that have appeared. I prefer not to be a videographer. In fact, it's the greatest distraction for me. For many years, I tried to assist well-known UFO and crop circle researchers in the field. I've worked with Colin Andrews, I've worked with Stephen Greer, helping them with my clairvoyant sensing ability. For example, in '92 in England, Dr. Greer came over to Wiltshire to conduct some experiments in trying to initiate contact with the intelligences behind the crop circle phenomenon. And I was at that site. In fact, before this event took place, I had a clairvoyant impression a week before that something major was going to happen in a part of Wiltshire, somewhere I didn't know before, that would involve an interaction between UFO and crop circle researchers and the source, one of the sources of the non-man-made crop circle phenomenon. So I took my tent and parked it right next to a wood where I thought this was going to happen, and immediately things started to occur, including great big beams of light, balls of light, devices and craft structured appearing, and of course the military often. I've lived in a valley in England where most of the world's crop circles have been found. They are mostly found within 40 miles of Stonehenge. And with Dr. Greer, for example, I was in '92 feeding him day and night my psychic impressions. At least 90% of the time, they were unfolding as I sensed it before. And there were people present who did the videography part of the experience, trying to record them. However, I found after a number of years of working with research, often they wouldn't share their material evidence with me, so eventually I started to do it myself. I started to be the videographer too, even though I prefer to work as the psychic, as the direct conscious connection with the intelligences. I've had 9 close encounters with extraterrestrial beings that I can recall in my life. One, for example, occurred with 40 witnesses, Dr. Greer included, who was on a hill at night time in England, announcing what the experiment was going to be for the week in '92. About 40 people present, including media and different researchers and experiences. And just before we got underway, I had a feeling that this group was too large. It wasn't very conducive to a CE5, a close encounter of the fifth kind. That is one where you initiate the experience. So you go somewhere and there's nothing happening, there is no UFO wave or flare of sightings. You do something that attracts or encourages an encounter of one form or another. And sorry if I get sidetracked. I have so much in here that I really would like to impart. Oh yes, the encounter of being. Dr. Greer had a device in his hand, presumably he said, was built to detect the presence of vehicles, craft, devices, because they often will give off an energy field that can be picked up if you have the right type of equipment. He had something specially built. As he was discussing the type of activities that would be taking place that week, I sensed immediately an object 2 miles of us, but it wasn't showing itself visibly because the conditions were not conducive. There were too many people present, too much expectation, mixed emotions and intentions and desires and so on. And I relayed this to several people present, and immediately the device started to bleep and register that there was something nearby. Because I couldn't couldn't see the object. I sensed it, but couldn't see it. I tried to remote view it, and since my early childhood, before encountering UFOs and extraterrestrial beings, I had many types of psychic phenomena, out-of-body experiences, psychokinetic experiences, and including remote viewing. So if I can't see something with my eyes, I will try to remote view it sometimes. And in this case, I found myself on board this craft with a being in front of me, and I tried to communicate with this being and say how I know this is not the best time for an appearance, it's not the best risk-conducive situation, there's too many people, etc. There's also the military nearby. But could you not just try to get everyone's attention, draw their attention to a state of one mind, appear, do a flyby or something? And this being thought about it for a moment and then just said no, and suddenly I was back in my body again. I've had to deal with a lot of, in my childhood, fear with the experience, because I've had beings come very close to me while fully awake. And I noticed, or rather I understood in my teens, that if I ever wanted to really understand this phenomenon, really communicate, really go out on a limb with other intelligences, I had to overcome fear. That's our number one stumbling block in life. Conditions our experience of anything, and inhibits actually our ability to deal with even a threatening situation, often in the best way. Moving on, in '93, living in Wiltshire, I also experienced unpleasant experiences, and I say this because they are not all love and light out there. There are also beings with apparent indifference, or beings with their own agendas. I would call them selfish in their intentions often, because they appear to not show great regard or respect or consideration towards us. And I think you have, like on Earth, you have both very benevolent, advanced, and you have also beings out there who technologically are very advanced, but are not necessarily spiritually very advanced, just like on Earth. So it's very important to be able to discern and differentiate the two and know who you're dealing with. And one of the ways we can tell this is really how they behave, how they treat us. There are sightings happening all over the world all the time, and this has definitely been cranking up, increasing in last couple of decades. We are now witnessing fleets of UFOs, not just single objects. We're also witnessing unidentified flying humanoids, down particularly in Mexico, but in a few other places, including Santa Monica. I've filmed 2 humanoid entities in broad daylight flying over Santa Monica. Most of the sightings that I have occurred in England until the last few months, and many of the sightings I've had in England, or encounters I've had, and now here, have occurred after conducting an earth-healing world peace meditation, where at the beginning of the meditation, myself, my wife, and anyone else who is involved with us, we send out a psychic invitation to any benevolent extraterrestrial civilization out there to simply come and participate in our meditation if they can, to join us in consciousness, mind, body, spirit, if they support what we're doing and they care about the earth and humanity, to simply participate. So I'm not trying to achieve contact doing this necessarily, but I'm aware they're out there. I'm simply inviting them to participate in the meditation. We can all do this. And it's very a good thing, I think, to do, especially when you have synchronized global meditations. But I've sent out the invitation to participate, and I've asked for permission to record anything that appears, and asked them to grant us a sign of their presence and participation. And in the last few months, I have videotaped, it is 60 or more, 60 sightings, and feel that these are interactive responses, these are affirmations, not only that we're not alone, but that there are intelligences out there that care. And there are many that would echo this, and we are living in a special time where many things are appearing. I even think that some of the not so benevolent ETs are also making appearances at this present time, because really benevolent ones do intend to go global and do a global event. I mean, many of us here, I'm sure, myself and many researchers have felt for, well, myself now for more than 2 decades, that we are all moving towards a global mass event exposure of their reality. And it's very important we don't react with fear to this. And many of the sightings that we are hearing about and being filmed in many places over the last few decades, they are like testing our sociological response to their presence. And this is being shown extremely down in Mexico, but other places too. And I encourage people to go to our website. It's called cropcircleanswers.com. Unfortunately, I don't really have time to fit in a crop circle segment right now. But we have decoded more than 200 pictograms at this point. And we have, on our website, cropcircleanswers.com, we present some of our footage of UFOs. UFOs are definitely involved in the crop circle phenomenon, but in my experience, there are 2 types of UFO and at least 2 basic sources to the crop circle phenomenon. Quickly, UFOs, many UFOs are ball plasma. Many UFOs are energy for electrified airborne gases and water vapor. They look like fireballs. They can be very interactive with your consciousness. That's one type of UFO. Another type is structured, technological, extraterrestrial. And both of those have created crop circles. If you would like to know more, please go to our website. I'll repeat it again to anyone who'd like to know afterwards, where we present a lot of that information. I've got to pass on now.
Fascinating. All I'm going to say is brace for impact. This is David Sereda.
Thank you, everybody, for traveling so far to come here. I think I'm going to talk about something I really never used to talk about on the radio or in TV. I don't know, how many people here have had a spiritual experience or an experience with UFOs? Aliens, so a lot of you, wow. That's great. When you really look at this field, this subject, it's so vast you could build a university around it. I mean, there's so many different categories, you know, from what Escamilla started with, you know, rods and, you know, NASA stuff. There's crop circles, there's the politics, there's, you know, what we have to gain the most, I believe, from this phenomenon is, oh, you have to get really close to these microphones, is look where we are right now. How many people have seen Al Gore's movie, The Inconvenient Truth? How many people believe we will beat global warming and we will live in a sustainable world? Not many. See, the number of hands that went up that were optimistic, and I'm a pessimistic optimist on that subject. I use kind of the tool of being pessimistic, hoping that we'll be optimistic, we'll actually attain that goal. But if you look at what we have to gain right now, we're sitting on a planet that may produce a mass extinction event. I mean, in Al Gore's movie, you look at those 4 peaks on the last 4 ice ages. I mean, the warming period that precedes the ice age. And our warming is way above the last one. It doesn't look really good right now. And then you think of, with the advent of all these flying saucers, all these UFOs coming here, they have the technology that could save this place. But we also have the technology. We have solar and wind. We have, we have the basis to make that transition. There's just not enough. There's not enough people on the planet who are going to make the change in time. So, but I want to talk about something different because I believe that we have so much to gain from this phenomenon. There are so many answers. There are so many problems we can solve by looking deeper into this and categorizing everything. But what actually drives us up here? I mean, all the rituals
space in mainstream media. Recently, last Saturday night, I was on Fox News, National, Heartland, and you know, the producer is working with me for a week on the phone. You think you're going to get to have this huge, you know, presentation, and you get there and you stand in front of this little camera, and they say the show is going to be 15 minutes. You think, oh, good, I'm going to get to say a lot in 15 minutes, and pretty soon you're on, and then it's over. It's like, and then the host says, we could go on and on forever about this, but we'll have to have you back. Well, we just got started. And that's the problem with television. Radio, thanks to Coast AM, you know, and shows like it, you know, we really can get deep on these shows and go, you know, much deeper into the phenomena. And with these conferences, we can, you know, meet people face to face. But what I'm going to talk about today, because the subject at hand is who are the extraterrestrials? So, and I've never really done this, but to talk about my own personal experiences, and there are a number of them that keep driving this. You know, I was born in 1961 in Alberta, Canada. My family moved to Berkeley in 1964, so my mom and my 4 brothers and my dad. He was getting his PhD in Berkeley. And in 1968, on the way home from elementary school one day, I saw this crowd of people assembled on the street looking at a flying saucer. It wasn't a far away, blurry thing. It was really close, and it was shimmering. You could see these little wavelets coming off of it. And that is consistent. The little waves around the UFOs are consistent in a lot of the reports that people, in fact, if you look at O'Hare, how many people have followed the O'Hare story recently? The eyewitnesses say they could see these almost like heat waves rippling off of the UFO. Well, that is the core key to their propulsion system. And what happened to me is after my sighting that day, after a full 20 minutes of watching this thing, and I wish I had a high definition camera like I have now with 20 times zoom, because it would be this big in the frame. I mean, it was that close. I started a series of dreams about the UFO's propulsion system. And at 7 years old, I'm dreaming about quantum physics problems, and I don't even know what those problems mean. But the dreams showed one set of multicolored lights spinning clockwise and one going anti-clockwise on the same axis. But with that visual, there was information going into my brain at 7 years old. This was the beginning for me of extraterrestrials teaching me the foundations, so that later in my life, as I started to be more involved in physics, I would eventually develop a leading theory on how they actually move, how you could ultimately go not just to another star system, but to another galaxy. And that work is very evolved for me right now. By the time I was 13 years old, my father introduced me to meditation and prayer practices, which by the time I was 18, I was meditating every single day. Sitting in meditation, I've done a lot of different techniques, and I rarely ever miss. I'm 45 years old now, and I've hardly ever missed a day of meditation. Once in a while when I travel, I do. And with that, some of the most profound experiences started to happen to me. After my sighting in 1968, I didn't really think, I didn't linger on the UFO question. I didn't even know it was a world issue. It wasn't until 1972 when I saw a documentary on TV, or the early 70s, about the Billy Meyer case. I said, oh my God, that's what I saw. That's what I saw in Berkeley that day. And when I was a young teenager, I met across the street from us. Our family had moved back to Vancouver, Canada this time. A very profound psychic who was around, in Germany during World War II. And she told me, she looked at me and she shook, and when she was looking at my palm, she said, when you're 27, the most amazing thing is going to happen to you. It's going to be unbelievable. And she was shaking and she walked away. And I said, what could it be, 27? I mean, am I going to sell a movie with Spielberg? No, that never happened. Am I going to make $1 million? I don't know. Well, something even better than selling a script to Spielberg happened. Something so unbelievable. These 2 days rocked my entire life. It transformed me. It just threw me onto my spiritual path. But what happened was on December 22nd, 1986, it was cloudy. I was up in Vancouver, Canada. It was rainy and depressing. I started to feel what James, the psychologist, calls vastation. I started to shake. I started to feel like I was cracking, like I was coming apart at the seams. Like my sense of ego and self was not strong and full. It was like crumbling. And I started to get really nervous, and I was trembling, and oh my God, I felt like I'm dying. I felt like it was a death kind of experience, but I wasn't hit by a car or struck by lightning, like Daniel Brinkley was. But what was about to happen to me was very similar. I lied down, and instantaneously, it's like I was gone. I was in this very clear vision. There was this old man who was dying, lying in his bed, in this most poor home. I mean, the walls were peeling, the wallpaper was peeling. And I thought, oh my God, he's dead. And all of a sudden, he got up and he said to me, do you want to see an angel? And I said, yes. And the split second I said yes, a showering beam of white light just poured down from above. And it was so powerful and it was so loud. There was the most thunderous sound of angels singing. It was deafening. It was like the music of the spheres that Pythagoras talks about. It was the most beautiful music unimaginable, but I was terrified. There was no love, there was no ecstasy, there was just pure fear. There was this beam, and my body was shaking, and on my bed, I was fully aware of this, I became paralyzed piece by piece. My feet became paralyzed, I couldn't move them if I tried. My legs became paralyzed, and then my arms became paralyzed. And at this point I thought, this is terrible, this is not a good experience. But because of the beauty of the angel scene, something told me, just relax. Just let it destroy you. Just let it annihilate you. I mean, obviously this can't be that bad. And when I finally surrendered, I lost control of my neck. I couldn't move my neck anymore. And then all of a sudden, it was so loud. At the moment that I surrendered and I got over the fear, the key word is getting over the fear, explosion of ecstasy started in my belly. I mean, it was like 1,000,000 suns of ecstasy. It was torrential love and ecstasy. When that explosion occurred, all of a sudden I just started going out of my body, shooting up into the universe. And I saw my most recent past life, which I was a Tibetan Buddhist monk who was killed during the invasion in the 1950s. And all of a sudden I started shooting up into the light. I must have been going millions of times the speed of light. And I actually took a journey that went through 7 ascending heavens in God. And in each heaven, the ecstasy multiplied another 1,000,000 times. I mean, it was unimaginable. I never even, in my wildest dreams in my life as a meditator, ever thought that heaven would have that much ecstasy. I mean, I thought I'd be happy and blissed out, but this was torrential ecstasy. I mean, it was hard to bear. And as I accelerated through these heavens, as I approached the edge of, so let's say I was approaching the edge of the first heaven, my physical body was being crushed by love and ecstasy and qualities that I can't even name. And at the moment I was being crushed, I cried to God, please stop. I would enter a new heaven. And in that new heaven, I got a new body that could withstand even more ecstasy and more love. And to make a long story short, I went through 7 of them. By the time I got to the edge of the 7th, I mean, there's no way, being a human being, you can possibly imagine what that kind of love and ecstasy is like. That kind of love and ecstasy creates galaxies, creates supernovas. So I came back to my body, no ecstasy. It's all gone. Just like that. It's like someone turned out the light. I'm a human being walking around with the arms and the legs. And the next day, December 23rd, 1986, it happened again. Same time in the afternoon, 4:50 in the afternoon. And I went through the 7 heavens again. But what happens is when you have an experience like this, you come back and it drives you. You look at the world, you look at the 4 dimensions of height, width, length, and time, and you think, you already know there's more to the universe than this. You know there's more. So the next thing that happened, I mean, I'm meditating every day. I'm doing Buddhist practices, mostly Buddhism. I'm doing rebirthings and breath therapies and vegetarianism and fasting. I mean, I'm on a hardcore mission. I became a tree planter. I planted over 1.3 million trees in my 22 years career as a tree planter and an environmentalist. And I wanted to get closer to God. I mean, to me, who our visitors are, I mean, I'm going to get further into this now because I start to have more and more of these experiences. There are divine spiritual beings who are trying to communicate with all of us right now to, take the planet into a higher level, another major shift. But there are a lot of dark energies out there also. I had mostly experiences with really wonderful beings as I was meditating more and more and more. And let me just look here in my notes because I got just a number of these. When I moved to California in about 1984. I was trying to sell movie scripts that were conscious. And I came this close all the time. I wrote a screenplay called Angel of the Sea, which is the opposite of The Exorcist. I mean, why couldn't anybody make a movie for kids where it wasn't the devil, it was an angel, and it was this little girl who was getting visited by angels and blinding light in a room and things levitating around like poltergeist, but it was a positive experience. And I even and they turned down. I mean, I got turned down by everybody, and I came really close. And then all of a sudden, I was living in Benedict Canyon, you know, roommating in the canyon, and one night, in the middle of the night, and this gets into a phenomenon that a lot of people are experiencing with, once again, this bright beam of light came down in the middle of the room, in the middle of the night. I was lying on the bed, and it was so loud, and I was the only one home. I was terrified. I mean, it was thunderous. And as it activated my body, my chakras, my energy centers, it had these tonalities in it, these musical qualities, and the music was going octaves. It was going up several octaves, and as it went up each octave, the atoms in my body started to vibrate, and they became thinner, 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 more and more transparent. And I got to the point that I thought I was going to get beamed up on a ship. I thought they were preparing me for perhaps the rapture, or what Christian mysticism would call the rapture. They were going to beam me up somewhere, but I couldn't see a ship. There was nobody there to say, David, you know, this is who we are. We're going to on this ship. And at that moment, I got so afraid. I fought with all of my might, and it was torrentially loud. And to come into my body and get to my senses, I ran into the bathroom, and I locked myself in the bathroom and turned the heater on and just shook and wrapped a blanket around myself. Well, to make a long story short, that happened to me again in 1994. I was doing a company called the Green Blue Corporation in Los Angeles, trying to raise money for eco-venture capital technologies like hydrogen fuel, helium-3 fusion, technology that would transform the planet. Well, to make a long story short, we met the richest people in the world, and none of them wanted to do anything about these technologies at that time. This was way before Al Gore's movie. We were trying to sell the solution to, you know, the problems on the planet. Same thing happened. In the middle of the night, one night, one of these beams of light came in. You wonder, I was living in the Century City Towers at that time. How does a beam of light from one of these interdimensional ships come through the wall? How does it, you know where I am? It came through again. It was even louder. It was so deafening, and it was so bright. I opened my eyes in the room, and I could see this bright light in this beam, but I couldn't feel even the sensation of my heartbeat or my skin or anything. And once again, I went up 7 octaves. I couldn't take it. I got so scared, I backed out. So the next major experience that I had was probably the greatest experience of my life. Being a Buddhist practitioner and doing yoga for many years, this was a great surprise to me. My environmental company, Green Blue Corporation, went bankrupt. I had to go tree planting again that year, and because they fined me for back taxes, they wiped out all the money in my bank account. I was poor. I had nowhere to live. I pitched a tent to my father's ranch in Topanga. He had a 3-acre ranch in Topanga. And during a rainstorm in 1994, I'm lying on the ground. My company fails. I really feel like, you know, nobody wants to save this planet. And the night, I started to become so cold I'm getting hypothermic. I left my body. I floated above my body. And I came upon the oak trees, the California oak trees, and there was a giant Christian crucifix shaped like a cross made of granite, 30 feet tall granite crucifix. And beneath it is a baptismal font shaped like a cross of water. And the water was calling me with this beautiful angelic energy. I fell into the water. I got baptized by what we call the Holy Spirit in Christianity. And I was taken above the rain clouds, and the sun hadn't risen yet. And all of a sudden, these millions and millions of tiny atoms of light, they were so beautiful. They were in the whole universe. They all just rushed together and manifest the body of Jesus Christ right in front of me. And I looked at him, and oh my God, he was 1,000 times brighter than our sun. I fell flat on my face. And this was the beginning of my education process directly from Jesus on singularity, which is the subject of my lecture tonight at 6 o'clock. The secret to how we could move anywhere in the universe we want to, the ultimate answer to propulsion, to cellular aging, disease, and death and war. He taught me in person, falling flat on my face. Every time I tried to look at him, it's not just the physical light. I mean, it's not just the light. It's what it's made of. It's made of so much love, so much grace, so much beauty, ecstasy, wisdom, and power. It's all hitting you. And physically, in spirit, I could not lift my body off the ground. I was humble on the ground. I looked at him for 1 second. I went, oh my God, the man is God. The man is exactly who he says he is. And I got to hold his feet, which were bare and in sandals. And just looking at his feet, I was just torrential ecstasy. But the point I want to make now, from this point on, about who are visitors, from that moment on, instantaneously, I had the ability to see the dead, to see spirits. Within days, I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would see beings in front of me floating three-dimensionally like people are in front of me right now. I could see extraterrestrials. I started getting visited on a regular basis, not necessarily by angels, not necessarily by great masters like Jesus Christ or Buddha, but beings. And some of them were actually extraterrestrials. And to actually be able to see this with your own eyes, to see three-dimensionally, interdimensional beings on a regular basis is so strange. You almost think you're living in another universe, that there's something maybe even going wrong here. But as I started to have more experiences with these beings, and I started practicing more and more my meditation practices, I started to realize that the invisible universe was a key into this whole problem of where is our role in the universe? Where are we on this planet? And how do we move? How do we communicate with other beings in the universe? That is where I started to become more and more interested in the invisible universe and starting to focus on cameras, actual cameras that could see, like NASA has video cameras that can see into the invisible ultraviolet, the infrared, and so forth. How much time do I have left? 2 minutes? So, for me, that was like the beginning of having that access, having that direct access to these kind of encounters. So when you see many UFO researchers up on the world, a lot of us, it's not just, yeah, there's a flying saucer and we're trying to prove that they're real. It's about that ultimate dream of finding out we're not alone in the universe. We can actually have these experiences ourselves, like many people who put up their hands have had. And it's about finding the answers and making that contact. Even physicist John Nash, from the movie Beautiful Mind, said he was receiving messages from extraterrestrials and we electrocuted him and told him he was schizophrenic. And he solved the math problem of his time. Pythagoras, the great mathematician, said the same thing if you read Peter Gorman's book, Pythagoras of Life. Some of the greatest thinkers of our time have claimed to have these contacts. And I believe it is through these contacts and through these children, the new children that are coming into our planet, that we are going to solve these problems, that we are going to ultimately reach the goal of living sustainably and not destroying our planet. And I think that is consistently the message that a lot of people are getting from the positive presence of extraterrestrials. Thank you.
Terrific presentation. I think it's important that we stress the spiritual aspect of this whole science, because it really is, at the end of the day, not only science, but is spirituality. We are going to move on to our visual presentation now with Rob Simone. You can see some special photographs, some things you might not see in other places. After that, we will go to questions, and then after that, we also have special guests at the end of our presentation. But looking forward to the visuals for sure. Rob Simone.
Hey, how you guys doing? I, like many of you, was drawn to this field of ufology because it represented a path of a person who's interested in spiritual growth. Anyone who really wants to find out what's going on in this world has to first address the question of what is our place in this world and work backwards from there. So the concept of becoming aware of our place in the world is key to maintain a proper perspective to carry on a world that is self-sustainable. Now, I started working in this field in an avenue that I thought was unique and very practical. It was a very interesting approach to ufology, and I spent a year in Sedona after being a musician for about 8 years. Saved up all my money, moved out to Sedona for a year, and volunteered for the organization called CAUSE, Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. Anybody ever heard of that? Many. It's been a while. Now, back in the late 90s, Peter Gersten, somebody's going to turn my mic, I guess. We can't get more into it. Back in the 90s, there was an organization called CAUSE. Peter Gersten was an attorney, and he had the idea of bringing lawsuits against the government for information about UFOs. And I thought it was a great way to start dissecting this, one of the greatest puzzles, one of the greatest mysteries of all time. And, as it turns out, one of the greatest cover-ups. So, we moved out there, and I started to take a look at the evidence that he acquired. And I was already a paralegal by training. So I started to look at this evidence, the photographs, the eyewitness testimony, the affidavits, the same measure of evidence that you can use to convict a person of murder we had as it relates to the UFO phenomenon. You gotta turn my mic. Lift the mic
Lift it up, lift the mic up to your
no, I'm talking right into I can't.
mic up, lift the mic up. There you
Yeah.
go. Yay, much better.
Yeah. No, I can't get much more into it. There's a mixer in the back if somebody wants to turn it up. Okay, I'm yelling already. Sorry.
Half of us can't hear you.
Yeah, well, they're turning it up now. All right. I don't want you to miss a word of this. Yeah, Robert's working on the Mackie right now. There's a fader on one of them, Robert. So anyway, we had this incredible amount of evidence. Suing the DoD and DARPA. We tried bringing lawsuits against the military. There was one famous. Is that better?
When you talk
Yeah?
into the mic.
Yeah, I can't get any closer. Yeah. No, I can't. If somebody wants to crank it up a little bit, I'm kind of right into it already here. But
When you turn your head. Yeah.
all right, okay,
It's you.
gotcha. So anyway, so there was one famous where this UFO actually crashed in somebody's car. It happened back in the late 70s, and it left the two occupants of this car with severe radiation burns. It was an amazing, amazing case. What was our recourse legally? And if you look at the UFO phenomenon, what's a legal recourse going to be? Not much. Because when we tried to sue the they're a sovereign entity. You can't sue them. And even with these two people almost dying in the hospital of radiation poisoning, there was still very little that we could do, very little that we could bring about in a legal sense. But I'll say this. Some of the cases actually were appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. So we did manage to make a dent in it through the legal process. And that was how I got into this field, because I thought it was a very practical approach. But that wasn't enough for me. So then I went around the world for 3 years exploring this phenomenon in the developing worlds. Because I want to know what the attitudes are of the people in South America, in Egypt, in the Middle East, in India, in Nepal. And that's what a lot of my research centers on. And I was stunned to find out that they're having the same experiences as we are. But unlike people here in the West, they didn't have this need to qualify it and quantify it. They didn't feel a need to prove it. They have already accepted it into their paradigm. And that's something that I think is very important, because if you want to open a window to the universe, if you want to have an experience with things that are outside of the realm of normality, you can do it. You have to take this belief that you're maybe hinging on or flirting with and put it all the way through your being. And once you do that, you will have a completely different experience than, say, your neighbor who's closed-minded. It's the same way for civilizations. Look at Sumeria in Egypt. They had these incredible experiences with people outside of our realm. Why? Because all of their mindsets were open to it. If you take one step toward this phenomenon, it'll take 2 steps towards you. So that's, I think, an important thing to say from the start. And of course, we know that, but the experience for us is something that we're holding out on, because we haven't maybe seen enough proof that we can accept it. But if you don't have to wait for that, because I think this cover-up by the military, by the government, by this industrial complex, is really a crime against humanity, because it stifled our spiritual evolution. Because that's the next step. Where are we in the world? What is our place? And once we have enough with this mindset, I think a big switch is going to be thrown. And then maybe these ETs will say, okay, now there's enough of people that are ready for this that we can start to initiate contact, both on a big and small scale. So I think that's an important part of this, is just having this perspective. And believe me, I've traveled through the Middle East. I've traveled through India and Nepal. I currently host a radio show in London, England, and you can hear it online for free. website, and I used to have a show in Nepal in Kathmandu, and I talked to everybody about this phenomenon. They're all okay with it. Ask any Hindu. They're okay with life outside the universe, God's coming down in chariots. Ask any Muslim. All the ones I spoke with were the first to relate paranormal experiences. And that's another aspect I specialize in, is Islamic ufology. Believe it or not, in the Quran, there are multiple references to these beings we as ufologists categorize as classic ETs. Now, we all heard the stories about the Bible, Ezekiel, the wheels within wheels, and Noah, Genesis chapter 5, and the Nephilim. Well, the Quran has got 5 times as much as those types of references that those who are students of the Bible would put into the cherubim or seraphim category. I even talked to the Dalai Lama about the possibility of what I had to say of Buddhists on other planets. And that led to an incredible discourse. So it is already ingrained into most of the world, and I have to say this, we here in the West are a little bit behind everybody else. Of course, not this room, company excluded, of course, but outside LA, the heartland, wherever you like, we're behind because they've already gone over that curve. So there's a lot happening. That's where I came into this. And I write articles for about crop circles, about research about international ufology. I just shot a documentary in Hawaii about UFOs there, and that was extraordinary. Because I don't know if anybody heard about this, but 2 weeks ago, the local Fox News affiliate in Oahu, with their own cameras, caught a UFO. Did anybody hear about this? Yeah, some of you. It is an incredible sighting, and they even had some eyewitnesses on the beach. And I was just there shooting a documentary, and I talked to the elders, the Hawaiian elders, people who were 100% Hawaiian, and have lived, and their families have lived there all the generations. They talked about green fireballs that would fly through the air, and spirits dancing around. So it's funny to think that we here in the West got a problem with that. And I hate to say this, amazing Randy, the other guys get up and start these very lower astral level arguments about this and proof and psychic awareness. We're all psychic, it's just a matter of degree. And I think when we start enhancing this unlimited potential inside of us, we are going to be in the very same place that we find ourselves now with our current administration as representatives for us, unfortunately. So that, I think, the pendulum is starting to shift. We're entering into 2012. We're coming ever closer to where the universe is getting more dense. So there is, I think, going to be more of these sightings, more and more of these things popping up. As I say, it's part of a mindset, first and foremost. If you want to see UFOs, it helps to be open to the experience, doesn't it? It's just like these orbs. Everyone's catching these orbs in the cameras. And it's when you start walking into it, it just opens up right in front of you. I just want to mention before I've got some stuff to show you, some little bits and clips of images that I've gathered. I just recently put out a book here about some of my articles, and the Middle East is a very interesting place. Why? Because here we have a classic example of the intersection of mainstream religion, turbulent warfare in the case of ancient Samaria, and again, a ongoing, some would say, ET presence. Now, when I was in Jerusalem, I had a hotel that overlooked the whole city. And one night, I was able to photograph a black being coming out of the Dome of the Rock. And I was stunned by this, because it went all the way up to the sky, as far as you can see. It was no trick of a shadow, because the whole city has got a lot of light pollution. It only happened 2 or 3 times. And what's interesting to note here is that it came directly out of the Dome of the Rock. And why is that important? Well, for those students of history, you'll know that the Dome of the Rock is the most significant place on the planet for Islam, for Judaism, for Christianity. It's an actual rock. It used to be where the Solomon's Temple was, where they kept the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy of Holies, where the Knights Templar took up residencies and took all the treasure out. But now it's a mosque. It's under Palestinian rule, in the middle of Jerusalem, by the way. which is a whole other story. But they have it, they own it, they run it. And that rock that this thing houses is the foundation stone of the world. It's when God made the planet, he made that bit first, so it says. It's also the place where Isaac was going to sacrifice his son. It's also the place where Muhammad ascended into heaven. And coincidentally enough, it is also the exact location where Jacob saw those ladders ascending into heaven, Jacob's ladder. And what I think that I managed to capture is this transcendental energy that's interacting on a physical plane. And if my guess is right, as we approach 2012, and I'm going to be lecturing about this tomorrow at 10 a.m., as we approach 2012, these stargates, these power centers, human or terrestrial, are becoming more and more activated. No New Age lingo to say that we're entering in a denser place in the universe. We actually are. Our solar system is coming down into the rim of the galaxy. There's just more stuff in this part of the galaxy. More asteroids, more comets, more planets. So the laws of nature are different. They're more dense. And I think it will inherently activate some of these dormant power cycles. The same power cycles that we see in the pyramids of Giza, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, all the great mysteries that you wonder what was going on to make them happen. The Lions of NASCAR, the Easter Island. I think these things are cyclical, and I think that is what is tied in to some of these events. Let me bring you just a couple quick ideas. Oh, by the way, you got. I want to show you a couple videos to demonstrate what's happening, because as we move through, and you've all heard about what's going on in Mexico, we're getting better and better images. They're coming closer and closer to the ground. And why is it happening so much in Mexico? Like this video here. The thinking is that, I don't know how many people have been to Mexico, but the Mexican people are great open people. They're you know, I can't say enough about them. And when you get a group mindset together, that has an incredible power unto itself. If everyone's closed-minded and they all got a big group, well, very little is going to happen to them metaphysically, it's safe to say. But the Mexican people are way into this. They're well down with it. And here we have an incredible piece of footage that shows virtually an armada of ships captured in the sky on one continuous CCD video camcorder. Also interesting to note, if you're able to get a good look at this, and I know this is not the best resolution, but they're all moving together. And to do you one better, there is one or two in this group that's not like the rest, that are unusually shaped, that seem to be, you know, maybe the some sort of commanding craft. But we have to also redefine our idea of what a UFO is supposed to look like. I'm going to show you one here in a minute that baffles the imagination. They are showing up as light ships. They're showing up as specks in the sky. There's the one right there. This one is not circular like all the rest. It is strangely triangular. There's a little enhancement of it. This is a few years ago. This was, I think, Jose Rodriguez out of Oaxaca took that. There is another one I want to show you that again fits this the category of what in the world is that? What's interesting about this shot also is that the shape itself goes from square to circular. Now again, you really have to throw away all your sort of ideas, your preconceived notions of what UFOs look like, because they are coming in any shape and form. Now I'm going to show you another one that was taken near Alvarado Air Force Base in Italy, northern Italy. And this one is another demonstration of how close these things are coming. It is something that is unclear. We still don't have clear a background story on it, but when you see how close it is and how crisp it is, it suggests to me that this was a staged event. In other words, whoever was behind this camera knew this thing was coming. Taken in northern Italy. Now watch it leave, because when you see the UFO clips, you never get to see them go. This one you do. And believe me, they're getting better and better. And I've seen so many of these things that it's starting to look like they're just, every time you look up, you know, you'll see these things. Now this is another one from Mexico. This was taken in Guadalajara. And again, this illustrates my point I was talking earlier, that they're coming in different shapes. Now what I really like about this one is that they pull back in the same, and then he zooms in on a plane, and that gives you a sense of how far away this thing was. And then he pulls out of the plane and goes back to the shot. So it just gives you a sense when he pulls out like that of how deep it is. I'll do it one more time here. Now this, you can see by how shaking the camera, he was probably zooming in 30, 60 times. So you start to lose it when you come back to a fixed focus. Yeah, that was a good one. Now it's not uncommon. These things are happening. I get reports, my radio show airs all over the world, and I get reports from people that are seeing them everywhere, especially Turkey for some reason. I don't understand why Turkey is so, there's so much events happening in Turkey. This one, of course, there's a lot happening from, that we see from the fixed cameras on the space shuttle. Some of you might know before. This is NASA. You know, some of the best photographs and images of UFOs are taken by NASA. I'll do one more for you. This one I like because this was taken in England, and I like it because this object, while you're looking at it, splits into two objects. And that rules out right there 99% of conventional explanation. Here it comes again. Extraordinary. And again, all these experiences are available. So if you want more information, my website's robsimone.com. And thanks very much. And I guess we'll open up the questions.
Well, needless to say, I think it's quite remarkable. Obviously, the evidence is presented itself. Right before we go to questions and our special guest, didn't talk too much about just on my own behalf, but tomorrow at 5 o'clock I'll be doing my presentation called The Extraterrestrials Are Here. And I've been working with Serena for a long time, right across from me here. And what I'm going to be talking about is that you're working with a committee. Everyone is really walking with a committee. You just can't see this committee. They are in the unseen. You'll feel their presence at some time. You'll be inspired by them at some time. And what we learned about this was that there are many different kinds of visitors that are walking with us. And in this case, we're going to be talking about the Pleiadians tomorrow. They are your friends. They are like us. They have simply benefited from greater time, greater knowledge. And so, you'll find this a remarkable presentation at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We're going to go to some questions. We have a special guest coming up here. We're going to go to some questions right now because I think everybody has presented their evidence. We got this gentleman right here. He wants to ask a question.
The gentleman in the black hat, you talked about the UFO over LA in 1942. I've heard about it too. And like, it came at night, so I guess leave, I know they fired a lot of, 40 millimeter, 5-inch shells at it. It just bounced off its streams or
Yeah, it
whatever.
was anti-aircraft shrapnel. We shot like about 1,500 rounds at it for over an hour and a half. It hovered, the big one hovered over Santa Monica and Culver City, and it slowly flew over San Pedro, and then came back, and then finally flew out towards the ocean.
And you say at 6 o'clock they're going to show some films of
At
it?
6 o'clock is my film, a movie. It's a poster, right? And it took me 2 years to make this film. I did it with absolute $0. Okay. Well, no. It did cost me a little to make it. Nothing's free, man. I had to license footage and everything else. But what I do, and I want you all to please take heed to this, I sell credits, all right? So I'm going to sell co-producer credit for my second movie called The Human Record, and then the third one on Moonrising, So I'm selling co-producer credits, associate producer credits, and special thanks credits. Man, you get a special credit in my film at the end roll. And when you see the film tonight, you'll see how the credit roll, a lot of people usually walk out on the credits in a movie. Well, this one, I put in some UFO stuff that's happening, in space, and so people stay and watch the whole movie from beginning to end, man. Instead of having black frame with credit roll, you get to see UFO stuff that you'll never see otherwise. But yeah, I found the footage, man, from 1942, and it's incredible. The shooting at this thing. This is.
None of it was in the daytime, but they had lights shining on it.
Yeah, they had the searchlights, and it was right after Pearl Harbor. So, everybody thought maybe it was the Japanese attack. The West Coast, but it turned out to be the first time that the military ever shot at a UFO. Thanks. But not the last, yeah. We're still shooting at them.